What would you do if you were just trying to catch fish for dinner and instead pulled up $15 million in cartel money from the bottom of the ocean? At 4:23 a.m. on a foggy Tuesday morning in March of 2019, John Blake was checking his nets 12 miles off the coast of Baja California when his sonar picked up something massive on the ocean floor. It wasn't a school of fish. It wasn't a shipwreck. It was 47 waterproof containers filled with more cash than most people see in a lifetime, and it belonged to the Sinaloa cartel. Before I tell you how John pulled off one of the most audacious maritime thefts in modern history, make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and let me know in the comments what city you're watching from. Because trust me, this story isn't just about money. It's about survival, family, and a fisherman who was never supposed to win. At 42, John Blake was a fisherman shaped by the Pacific. Weathered hands, sun-darkened skin, and a creaking boat named Santa Maria, passed down through generations and held together by fiberglass and prayers. His wife Carmen had died of cancer 3 years earlier, leaving him with heavy debts to cartel-linked loan sharks and a teenage daughter, Elena, who dreamed of studying marine biology in Mexico City. Every month, John surrendered part of his meager catch to men in expensive trucks, while working longer, riskier trips to keep Elena's dream alive. On the foggy morning of March 15, 2019, he set out as always, guided less by sight than by decades of knowing the sea's hidden currents. The shallow waters no longer yielded enough fish, forcing him farther out, where the ocean was richer and far more dangerous. 3 hours out from shore, John's fish finder began acting strangely. The sonar showed what looked like a school of large fish, but the pattern was wrong. Instead of the organic flowing shapes that fish made as they moved through the water, the sonar displayed rigid geometric forms arranged in an almost military precision on the ocean floor. John had seen enough shipwrecks to know this wasn't one of those either. Wrecks created chaotic debris fields, not neat rows of identical objects. His first instinct was to ignore it and continue to his planned fishing spot, but curiosity gnawed at him. John had heard stories from other fishermen about finding valuable cargo that had fallen from ships or been dumped by smugglers. Occasionally, someone would pull up a bale of drugs in their nets and quietly sell it back to the cartels for enough money to repair their boat or pay off debts. John had never been that lucky, but the strange sonar reading made him wonder if today might be different. He anchored Santa Maria above the anomaly and prepared his diving gear. John wasn't a professional diver, but like most fishermen in the area, he could hold his breath long enough to untangle nets or inspect his boat's hull. He had an old wetsuit and mask that he used for emergency repairs. Basic equipment, but functional enough for shallow dives. The water was unusually clear despite the fog above, and as John descended toward the ocean floor 40 feet below, he could see the objects his sonar had detected. They were containers, dozens of them, each about the size of a large suitcase and clearly manufactured for waterproof storage. They lay scattered across the sandy bottom in a rough line, as if they had been dropped from a moving vessel and had drifted as they sank. John's heart began racing as he swam closer to examine one of the containers. Even from a distance, he could see markings burned into the plastic, symbols that any resident of coastal Mexico would recognize. The stylized serpent logo belonged to the Sinaloa Cartel, one of the most powerful and dangerous criminal organizations in the world. These weren't lost fishing supplies or innocent cargo. This was cartel property, and John had uncovered something that could either secure his family's future or erase it completely. Swimming back to the surface, John's mind raced through possibilities. Whatever was in those containers, the cartel would eventually come looking for it. But the containers were scattered over a wide area, and the recent storms had clearly moved them from wherever they had originally been placed. If the cartel knew exactly where their property was, they would have already retrieved it. John might have found something that even the Sinaloa cartel had given up for lost. Back on his boat, John tried to think rationally. The smart thing would be to motor away and pretend he had never seen anything. But the weight of his debts, Elena's dreams, and years of barely surviving pressed down on him like the ocean itself. This might be his only chance to change their lives, to give Elena the future she deserved and free himself from the loan sharks who treated him like property. John decided to retrieve just one container to see what he was dealing with. If it contained drugs, he could possibly sell them back to the cartels through intermediaries, claiming he had found them floating. If it was money, he would have to be much more careful, but the possibilities were staggering. He rigged a simple pulley system using his fishing winch and descended again with rope and clips. The first container was heavier than expected, requiring all of John's strength to secure it and signal his boat's winch to begin hauling. As it broke the surface, seawater streamed from around the sealed edges, but the container appeared to be watertight. John wrestled it onto his deck and stared at the locking mechanism. It wasn't complicated, just a heavy-duty combination lock that could probably be cut with the right tools. John's hands trembled as he used bolt cutters to break the lock. Inside the container, wrapped in multiple layers of waterproof plastic, were bundles of cash. Not Mexican pesos, but American $100 bills, more money than John had ever seen in one place. He pulled out one bundle and fanned through it quickly, estimating at least $10,000 in his hands. If every container held this much, and there were dozens of containers on the ocean floor, John was looking at more money than his family could spend in several lifetimes. But with the money came a terrible understanding of the danger he was in. This wasn't just cartel money, it was a massive amount of cartel money, the kind of loss that organizations went to war over. Whoever had been responsible for losing this fortune was probably already passed. John would be next if the cartel discovered his involvement. John quickly resealed the container and lowered it back into the ocean, marking the GPS coordinates on his fish finder. He needed time to think, to plan, and to understand exactly what he was dealing with before he made any irreversible decisions. But as he started Santa Maria's engine and headed back toward shore, John knew he had already crossed a line. He would be back tomorrow and the next day until every container was either in his possession or safely hidden where the cartel could never find it. John spent 3 sleepless nights planning his return to the container site. He studied weather patterns, tide charts, and the schedules of other fishing boats from his village. He needed to work during times when he would be alone on the water, and he needed a plan for storing and hiding whatever he recovered. The containers were too large and distinctive to keep at his house, and he couldn't trust anyone in the village with knowledge of such a valuable and dangerous secret. The solution came from his cousin Roberto, who owned a small marina and boat repair facility in the next town. Roberto stored equipment for fishermen and had several unused buildings that could hide the containers until John figured out how to safely convert the contents to usable money. John would have to trust Roberto with at least part of the truth, but his cousin had always been discreet and had his own reasons to dislike the cartels that controlled local business. On the 4th night after his discovery, John loaded Santa Maria with additional diving equipment borrowed from Roberto's marina. He brought heavy rope, flotation bags, and a portable winch that could lift much heavier loads than his boat's standard fishing equipment. The moon was dark, and thick clouds promised to hide his activities from any other boats that might be in the area. John reached the container site at 2:30 a.m., navigating by GPS in nearly complete darkness. The ocean was calmer than during his first visit, making diving safer but also making his boat more visible to anyone who might be watching. John anchored directly over the largest concentration of containers and began the dangerous work of deep-water salvage in the middle of the night. Each container required 2 dives, one to attach flotation and lifting gear, another to guide it safely to the surface and onto his boat. John could only carry 2 containers at a time without risking Santa Maria's stability, which meant he would need dozens of trips to recover the entire scattered fortune. The work was exhausting and terrifying, diving repeatedly in dark water while constantly listening for the sound of other boat engines. By dawn, John had successfully recovered 6 containers and transported them to Roberto's marina. The process had taken nearly 4 hours of continuous work, and John's body ached from the cold water and physical strain. But the contents of the containers made every moment of risk worthwhile. Each container held between $200,000 and $400,000 in cash, along with occasional gold jewelry and small packages of what appeared to be pure cocaine. John realized he had discovered more than just lost cartel money. These containers represented a major drug trafficking operation, possibly a payment for a large shipment or the proceeds from distribution across multiple cities. The total value could top $15 million, enough to change not only John's life, but the fate of his entire village. Yet it was also the kind of fortune that criminal syndicates would stop at nothing to reclaim. Roberto asked no questions when John arrived at the marina before sunrise, but his expression made clear that he understood the dangerous nature of whatever his cousin was storing. Roberto helped John move the containers into a locked building behind his repair shop, accepting John's promise of substantial payment once the situation was resolved. Both men knew they were risking their lives, but the potential rewards made the risk seem acceptable. Over the next 2 weeks, John developed a routine of pre-dawn salvage runs. He varied his routes to avoid suspicion, sometimes recovering 4 containers in a night, sometimes only 1. His fishing catches declined, but he told Elena and the neighbors he was testing new grounds that required longer trips. The containers were scattered across 2 square miles of seafloor, pushed into valleys and behind rocks by storms. With only a basic fish finder, John relied on visual searches that drained his air and tested his diving skills. By the 3rd week, he had recovered 38 containers, nearly $12 million in cash and narcotics, with 6 still lying in the deepest, most dangerous waters. His success drew attention. Fishermen noted his new gear and strange patterns, though John claimed he was helping Roberto's marina test equipment. Curiosity grew. Then came the breakthrough. 3 of the deeper containers held not just cash, but encrypted drives and records, shipping schedules, payments, cartel contacts. John couldn't read the files, but he knew they were worth more than money. The documents also revealed the truth. The haul had been a $15 million transfer from the Sinaloa cartel to Colombian suppliers, dumped overboard with trackers when a DEA patrol forced an emergency jettison. John realized the cartel had written off the containers after a storm destroyed their GPS trackers. From their perspective, the fortune had vanished into the Pacific. His salvage had gone unnoticed not because of stealth, but because no one believed recovery was possible. That illusion of safety broke when Roberto warned him about strangers at the marina asking questions. They posed as fish buyers, but Roberto knew cartel scouts when he saw them. Time was running out. The last 6 containers lay in the 60 feet of water, beyond John's comfort zone. Diving alone with long decompression stops and constant risk of failure, he pushed himself to the limit. On a moonless April night, he finished the job. These final containers held the richest haul yet, nearly $2 million apiece, plus gold coins and gems. In total, John had recovered over $15 million, one of the largest losses the cartel had ever suffered. But the victory soured quickly. Owning the fortune made him one of the most wanted men in Mexico, and converting it into a safe, legitimate life was more dangerous than finding it on the ocean floor. John's solution was as bold as the theft itself. Using fishing contacts and the records from the recovered documents, he laundered the money through the same networks the cartel used, paying bribes to corrupt officials for false identities and offshore accounts. He told Elena and the neighbors that his trips to larger cities were about selling fish, but in reality he was carrying hundreds of thousands in cash. By early summer, nearly $8 million had been converted into legitimate assets under false names, while the rest was hidden in desert caches and city safety boxes. The plan he and Elena crafted next resembled an intelligence operation. They would stage separate deaths. John in a fishing accident during storm season, Elena in a car crash on a mountain road. With the help of professionals skilled in making people vanish, they learned how to leave convincing evidence of death while disappearing into safe houses. The hardest part wasn't logistics, but sacrifice, abandoning their community and loved ones forever. John's mother and Elena's friends would grieve for them, never knowing they had survived. John and Elena implemented their escape plan during the first major storm of the season in late August. John took Santa Maria out during dangerous weather conditions, radioing distress calls before abandoning the boat to sink in predetermined deep water. Elena's staged car accident occurred the same night on a remote mountain road, with the burning vehicle containing DNA evidence, but no recoverable body. Both disappearances were investigated by local authorities, but the evidence supported the conclusion that father and daughter had died in separate tragic accidents. John's boat was found capsized and damaged by the storm, while Elena's car was discovered burned at the bottom of a ravine. The timing appeared coincidental but not suspicious, as dangerous weather often resulted in multiple accidents.